The morning fog hung low over the quiet street in Yorkshire, wrapping the old red brick houses in a ghostly veil that smelled faintly of rain and coal smoke. And I stood there at the iron gate of the home I had built with my own hands nearly 40 years ago, feeling the chill sink through my coat and into my bones as though the weather itself were reminding me that time doesn't ask permission before it moves on. My fingers clung to the cold metal, knuckles stiff from both the weight of the suitcase and the weight of what was happening. Behind the floral curtains my late wife Brenda had stitched by hand, I caught the faint outline of the living room where laughter had once echoed, where our little boy Daniel used to race through the halls chasing his toy cars, where the smell of fresh bread would drift from the kitchen while Brenda hummed old songs from the radio. That house had been more than bricks and mortar. It was the map of our life together, each creak in the floor a memory, each scratch on the doorframe a story. But that morning, all of it was being stripped from me in silence. Emma stood by the door, my daughter-in-law, her arms folded, her lips drawn tight as though kindness cost her too much to give. Behind her, Daniel avoided my eyes, and when she spoke, "Arthur, my parents will be moving in, and you'll be better off at Maplewood Retirement Home," it sounded as casual as discussing the weather. I wanted to believe I'd misheard, that my son would step forward and say, "No, Mum, he stays," but instead there was only the sound of my heart learning a new kind of quiet. I looked at Daniel, the boy I had taught to ride a bicycle, the man I had comforted after his first heartbreak, the child who once promised to take care of me the way I had cared for him, and all he managed was a low mutter. "It's best for everyone, Dad." I nodded because pride has a strange way of keeping tears from falling in front of those who don't deserve to see them. As I walked away, the gravel crunched beneath my shoes, and each step sounded like an ending. Maplewood smelled of bleach and boiled vegetables. The staff smiled too wide, the walls were too white, and the laughter of the residents never quite reached their eyes. Nights there were the hardest. I would stare at the ceiling and count the cracks as if they were constellations, remembering the warmth of our old bed, the rhythm of Margaret's breathing beside me, and the way she used to say, "Arthur, promise me you'll never let anyone make you feel small." They thought I would fade into the wallpaper like the others, that I'd become a soft-spoken relic content with bingo and reheated soup. But they forgot who built that house, who carried bricks through winter storms to give his family a future. I hadn't spent my life building something just to hand it to people who treated me like an inconvenience. Years ago, when Daniel suggested putting the deed in his name, I smiled and told him it wasn't necessary. I trusted him, yes, but I trusted paper and ink a little more. The deed remained mine, locked in a small metal box behind Margaret's old dresses. For weeks I said nothing, letting the world believe I'd been tucked neatly away, but inside me grew a steady, quiet fire. One afternoon I phoned George Lennox, an old friend who now ran an estate agency. "George," I said, "I think it's time to sell the house." There was a long pause before he answered, "Are you sure, Arthur?" I stared at the rain sliding down Maplewood's window and whispered, "I've never been sure." The sale moved quickly. I chose the buyers carefully. A young couple with a newborn, polite, gentle souls who spoke of the house as if it were alive. They loved the garden Brenda had planted, the fireplace Chris once used for camping indoors, the sunlit kitchen that smelled of cinnamon every Sunday. When the papers were signed, I felt something inside me unclench. A few days later I returned. The sky was the color of old pewter, and rain fell soft and steady as I walked the path I had laid with my own hands decades ago. Emma opened the door, startled, irritation flickering across her face. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, her voice slicing through the air. Chris appeared behind her, confusion clouding his eyes. "Dad, you can't just come back like this." I held out an envelope from my solicitor. "I'm not here for tea," I said quietly. "You have 14 days to vacate. The house has been sold." Silence settled thick between us, broken only by the rain tapping on the porch roof. Emma's mouth opened, but no sound came. Chris's hand trembled as he unfolded the letter. "You sold it?" he stammered. "I owned it," I replied, my voice calm as still water. "You wanted room for her parents, so I made room for a family that knows the worth of a home." I saw the color drain from Emma's face, saw Chris's shoulders slump as realization struck like thunder. "Where are we supposed to go?" he asked, the child in his voice echoing faintly. I looked him straight in the eyes, the same eyes that had once looked up to me, and said, "I hear Maplewood has vacancies." Their protest was a storm of words, threats, pleas, tears that came too late. But the law they had ignored now guarded me like an old friend. I left them standing in the doorway, framed by the life they had taken for granted, and as I walked away, the rain softened, almost kindly. People say revenge tastes sweet. I think it tastes like peace after a long drought. Now I live by the sea, in a small cottage, painted the color of sunlight. Mornings smell of salt and heather, and the waves speak in the same rhythm as Margaret's old lullabies. Sometimes Chris visits alone. He brings no excuses, no grand apologies, just sits beside me, holding his tea, eyes red from something heavier than regret. We talk about nothing and everything, the weather, the sea, the silence. I forgive him because forgiveness is the last gift a father can give, but I never forget, because memory is what keeps our dignity alive. And sometimes, when I watch the tide pull away, I think of that house and the day I walked from it. They believed they had cast me aside, but the truth was simpler and crueler. I had only stepped back long enough to remind them who built the ground they stood on. One night, not long ago, Chris asked in a whisper if I missed the old place. I smiled and said, "No, son, the house never left me. It just changed who called it home." He didn't answer, but the look in his eyes told me he finally understood that some things can be taken, sold, or forgotten, but a man's worth, once remembered, can never be evicted. And as I sit by the window watching dawn break over the water, the gulls crying overhead, I whisper to the wind, "You were right, Brenda. I didn't let them make me small." Then I sip my tea, and for the first time in a long life, everything tastes exactly as it should.